Hey everyone, welcome back to another video. It is an absolutely beautiful day here in Ohio, minus the humidity. It's a little bit humid, but we are seeing temperatures in the low to mid 70s right now. So we have our first fake spring going on. As the weather around here, typically it will give you a few days of hope warming up a little bit in springtime or before springtime, and then dip back down cold and snowy and everything else again before spring eventually makes its presence known. But that aside, we are going to work on the Lexus today, as obviously the Mercedes and the Volvo here, they definitely are not the Supra. And I need to get my 2JZ fixed somehow, and the Lexus is the best way to do that. So it's been a little while since we worked on this car, so just to give you a look at it again, it's a 67 millimeter VBN turbo car, twin turbo smart wastegates, pretty wild tube header on it. But the issue that we are going to address today is when I had this thing apart last and cleaned everything up, cleaned the header up and went to reinstall it. This is the same header that I've had on this car or the same cylinder head rather that I've had on this car for 12, 14 years, something like that. It's the same cylinder head that's been on the car since it was brand new. The car is a 92, so in theory it's a 30-year-old cylinder head. And the reason I'm telling you this is the threads that fasten the header to the cylinder head, the internal threads on the cylinder head have stripped out, and I had gone ahead and replaced or put threaded inserts in 2 of the holes, but the remaining 6 holes, the threads are questionable, and when I went to tighten the header back down, the threads didn't want to play nice any longer. So I went ahead and I bought a helicoil kit this morning. So we're going to start the video off by obviously pulling all of the hot side components back off of this thing and going in and helicoiling the remaining 6 holes. And this is something that I've wanted to do on a 2JZ head for a long time, as any aluminum threads, even good factory ones like the ones that were in a 2JZ cylinder head, they still have a lifespan. And unless you, especially when you run bolts to fasten the header down like I do as opposed to a stud, as the fastener goes in and out of the threaded holes many times over the years, eventually those threads will wear out and you're caught in the position where the fastener gets tight, gets tighter, and then eventually it becomes loose again. And we didn't even make it to the first portion of it getting tight before the threads were no longer. So I'll go over what a helicoil kit is and what these threaded inserts are for anybody who hasn't seen them. But first order of business, let's go ahead and get this hot side blown apart. All right, we have all the hot side apart and the exhaust side naked, ready for these helicoils to go in. And the last one of the bolts that I pulled out took the majority of the threads from its respective threaded hole out. So it's definitely time to put some new threads into the cylinder head. So at this point, before I begin installing the helicoils, let's talk about exactly what a helicoil is. So I have this kit unboxed right here, or opened up at least so we can see what's going on. And right here is a helicoil. And this is, as you can see here, it's an M10 by 1.5 helicoil kit. And normally the threaded holes on the cylinder heads on 2JZs are, at least on the exhaust side, are M10 by 1.25. However, the 2 helicoils that I had already installed into the cylinder head are M10 150s. So for the sake of consistency, I went ahead and I got this 150 kit. So essentially they are these little springs that, however they have them wound, that matches the respective thread of the kit. So this is the insert itself. You can see it has this little tang on the bottom that the helicoil driver right here, it has this lip that sticks up. Once, I guess you'd have to thread this in the whole way, but when you are installing it, you simply thread the helicoil down onto the driver and use the driver to twist it in and put it in its place. So this is the tap for it. This tap obviously matches up to the outside thread on the helicoil. So it's similar to a time cert. I prefer time certs more than helicoils, but I didn't have time certs to do this. So, and they had helicoils at the parts store. So it'll get the job done perfectly fine. And the only thing that I need to supply is right here, drill size 13/32 or 406 of an inch. So I need to root through my collection of drill bits, find a 13/32, and then I can go ahead and start drilling the drill the holes on the cylinder head, drill those out to 13/32. At that point, I can take the tap, I can put the threads in for the outside of the helicoil, and then we will be ready essentially at that point in time to install the helicoil. So I guess before that, let's talk real quick about the differences in helicoils and time certs and why you'd use one versus the other. So a time cert, you guys have seen me use those before. It's a solid steel threaded insert that has a shoulder on it, and that's good for, you can use it both on blind holes and through holes due to the fact that it has that shoulder on it and it will hold it in place. A helicoil, conversely, does not have a shoulder on it, so I really prefer to use these only for blind holes where you have a bottom of a hole that will hold it in place. Granted, there may be different styles of helicoils, as I know it's common practice to helicoil spark plug holes, but for just a normal helicoil like this, I probably wouldn't advise using it on a through hole, as you would have the possibility of your threads coming out or pulling out, and then you have not only not solved the problem of the lack of threads in that particular hole, you created a larger one by drilling the hole, or drilling the bolt hole out larger and having threads that don't match anything put into it. So hopefully that explanation makes sense. And at this point, let me go ahead, I'll find my drill bit and we can begin drilling those holes in preparation to put these inserts in. I have my 90-degree drill with a 13/32 bit in it. So we are now ready to drill out the threads on the head. So the only last thing I'll need to do is to get something to plug up the ports, as I don't want aluminum shavings making their way in there in case one of the valves is hung open, depending on where the engine is at in its rotation. I don't want aluminum in there to get between valve and valve seat, to muddy up the spark plug, and so on and so forth. Just isn't good to have debris in the cylinder. So go ahead, I'll get something to plug that hole up, or to plug each one of these holes up, and then we can move on with getting these holes drilled in preparation to tap and put the inserts in. Now we have all of our holes drilled, tapped, and blown out with compressed air. So we are now ready to install the thread inserts. So as I'm doing this, I'm going to take a little bit of red Loctite, put it on the outside of our thread insert, and then thread the thread insert into the hole, and then rinse and repeat 6 times. So I guess let's go ahead, get started with this, get these inserts in, and then this thing will be more or less ready to go back together at that point. Now, it might be difficult to see, if not impossible, but each one of the 6 remaining holes now has a thread insert in it. So they're all red Loctited. I'm going to give the Loctite a little bit of time to set up and cure, but we are good to go on that front. Now, there are threads in each one of the holes, and I don't have to worry about pulling out aluminum threads anymore, which is a huge victory, especially for an old cylinder head like this. So we'll let this cure up for a little bit and then get back to it and get everything reinstalled. The Loctite has had an adequate amount of time to dry up and set a little bit. And now, if you can hear, I have a nice peaceful rainstorm out there. I love working when it's raining. I love rainy days here. I love the sound of it, the smell of it, the whole experience. It's just one of my favorite things. But that's enough about me, enough sidebars. Let's go ahead and put the header back on this thing. And I know it doesn't look much different than when we started, but the header is now tightened down fully to the cylinder head. Everything is tight, everything is ready to go, aside from the downpipe. So when I built this downpipe in an earlier video, it wasn't quite long enough. And I wanted to wait to put any length onto it until I could raise the car up and look underneath and see exactly the additional distance that needed to be covered with the materials that I have on hand. Now this is an Inconel 625 downpipe. So materials, I don't have that many materials, and B, I'm not ordering new. If you've ever worked with or priced out Inco before, it's extraordinarily expensive and a little bit cumbersome to acquire. So this downpipe, the only reason that I built it is I had extra materials from when I built the header for the Supra, but I'm not ordering more materials just for this. So I have this section right here that is left over from just a piece of, or it's an industrial drop that I bought off of eBay a few years ago before I did the Supra, or before I built the Supra header. I bought that just as a test piece and something to play around with. So I have that material left over that's the same diameter as the rest of the downpipe. So what I'm going to do now is raise the car up and figure out, with the length of straight that I can get off of that piece, how much farther down in the engine bay that gets me, and I'll have to live with it, as like I said, I'm not ordering new materials. So let me go ahead, raise the car up, take a couple of measurements, make a cut on that Inco drop, and get it prepped and everything, and then we can go ahead and weld it onto the downpipe. I ended up using that entire extra section that I had, and obviously there's one unnecessary seam in doing that, as if you guys caught, there was a cut partially into that piece of tubing that was from initially trying to cut Inconel on the bandsaw before I knew that you couldn't do that. So I went ahead and I cut along that existing cut seam and made 2 welds for myself instead of 1. So if this was stainless, I wouldn't be happy about it. Due to the fact that it is Inconel though, I don't hate it, as it gives me the opportunity to practice welding Inconel just that little bit more when I really don't get to work with it all that often. So you can hear right now, if I put you guys down here, the piece is purging out, so I'm getting all of the regular atmospheric air out of it and pumping the tube full of argon to create an inert environment on the inside of it, also known as back purging. So I'll go ahead and I'll let this purge for a couple of minutes, and at that point I'll be ready to go ahead, strike an arc, and weld these two seams up and make this downpipe one piece yet again. There we go. We have overall an additional 6 inches added to this downpipe. Got to play with 2 welds and actually ended up having some of my nicest Inconel welds yet. So I knew there was a good reason, or I knew it was a good idea to have that extra weld, have that extra length added onto this downpipe, and it paid off in the end. And the back purge ended up very nice on it, so very pleased, and I learned a few things about welding Inconel as I was in the midst of doing it. So there was also knowledge gained at the same time, which is the most important part. So I'll go ahead now, take this downpipe back over to the car, put it back on, and then I think we will be about done working on this thing today. And there she is in all of her reinstalled glory. So I'm not sure how much you guys will be able to see, probably not a whole lot, but that additional 6 inches on the downpipe got us to a location that is very advantageous and very usable in terms of putting a V-band flange on it and building an exhaust from here. So that's the other part that we will have to do in the not too distant future on this thing, as the old downpipe was a 3-inch piece and the old aluminum exhaust was a 3-inch piece as well. So with this being a 3.5-inch downpipe now, I don't see any reason to reduce the size of the rest of the exhaust. So I'll take this opportunity as an excuse to build a new 3.5-inch exhaust for this car. But obviously we won't be doing that now. It is about time for me to get out of here for today. So before I go rambling on, thank you guys for tuning in. Thank you for watching these videos, supporting what I do here, being interested in it, watching me play around with parts, with projects, with metal, and all of the other things that go into building projects like these. So you guys are awesome. You make the channel what it is. I'm just the guy here playing with big toys. But that'll be it for this video. So until next time, be sure to subscribe, leave a like, leave a comment, and I will see you guys then.